Guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, November 22nd, 2020, and today we're going to be talking about the two runoff elections in Georgia and talk about why the Democratic Party could actually win both of those seats. Now, I'm not saying that this is an extremely likely situation. The Democratic Party would have to do a lot of fundraising efforts, a lot of canvassing, a lot of phone banking in order for this situation to occur. Typically, the general rule of thumb is that when turnout is high, the Democratic Party wins, and that was true in Georgia in the 2020 presidential election. I don't think that it's a secret that Joe Biden won Georgia. It was very notable because this state had not gone to a Democrat since 1992. It's been nearly 3 decades, and the first Democrat to flip it was not the first black president, but rather the former vice president, Joe Biden. And when you're looking at the state of Georgia, look how exceptionally close the actual results were. It was a 0.2% margin that gave Joe Biden the ultimate victory out of roughly 5 million votes cast in this state, a difference of 12,000 votes. 12,000 votes separate the two candidates. That is super amazing, I'd say. Just that the sheer closeness of the margin, this is the closest state we've seen on the presidential level, I believe percent-wise. So when you're looking at this 0.2% margin, you're asking yourself, is there a possibility Trump does win through a recount? Well, first of all, a hand audit has already occurred, and the Associated Press, literally everywhere that's credible, has already called the state of Georgia. And this state, even Fox News, has projected has gone to Joe Biden. So at this point, I'd say that this state is probably long gone for Donald Trump. You know, his campaign is still saying that there will be some evidence presented. We have yet to see it. But ultimately, Joe Biden is the apparent winner in the state of Georgia and the projected winner. So why did the Democratic Party, why do they have a chance at winning both Senate races? Well, in the Senate race on the regular level, they have 2 Senate elections. On the regular level, this is David Perdue's seat. He's the incumbent who was supposed to be up this election. The other seat is open because of a special election. David Perdue actually ran ahead of Donald Trump. If you gave Donald Trump David Perdue's vote share, Donald Trump would have won the state of Georgia, and we would have already projected it for the Republicans. But Donald Trump actually ran under David Perdue by roughly a half a percentage point. And when you're looking at Jon Ossoff, he also underperformed Joe Biden. So we can go ahead and compare those numbers. I want to talk about why it's going to be a little bit of a steep hill for the Democrats to actually win the first Georgia Senate race. I think the second one is much easier, but also still difficult given the state's trajectory. But looking at Jon Ossoff's numbers, 47.9, we can just go right back to the presidential numbers and talk about, why Jon Ossoff and why David Perdue very well may have outperformed Joe Biden and David Perdue both outperformed Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So Biden received 49.5%, but Donald Trump only received 49.3%. So that is a difference. That is a pretty significant difference between Jon Ossoff and Joe Biden. The margin is 1.6%. That separates the two candidates in terms of their vote share in this state. Now for Donald Trump, it's a decrease of around 0.4%, so roughly half a percentage point, but 1.6% is a much bigger difference for the Democratic Party vote share versus the Republican Party vote share in the Senate election. There also was a Libertarian candidate in the Georgia Senate race, and honestly, I think that those Libertarian Party voters are more conservative than they are liberal, but at the end of the day, they are going to have to make a decision between David Perdue and Jon Ossoff, and if they weren't too inclined to vote for David Perdue in the first place, chances are they probably aren't even voting in this upcoming runoff election. I mean, it's on January 5th. If you don't want to vote for either candidate, and there's no possibility of you voting for your Libertarian candidate, and it is a runoff election, so you're going to be stuck between the two candidates, you may not vote. And I'm not saying that the Democratic Party would win because these 115,000 voters aren't voting. There's always the possibility that many of them do end up voting for Jon Ossoff. They maybe voted Libertarian just because they don't like David Perdue, and they still may not like David Perdue and may end up sucking it up and voting for a Democrat. But there's a whole number of situations. I'm just saying that people may not be too inclined to vote for a runoff in the middle of the winter if they weren't too excited to vote for either candidate in the beginning. So David Perdue outperformed Donald Trump mainly because of his name recognition, I would say, and also his appeal to a lot of these voters in these states. Now, when I say name recognition, obviously we all know who the president of the United States is, but David Perdue is a longtime incumbent. They have a history with David Perdue and Republicans just like him. The state of Georgia does not have a strong history of supporting Republicans like Donald Trump in the past. Kelly Loeffler received 26% of the vote in her Senate race. She barely, made it to this second place spot. David Perdue has been in this state, and Mitt Romney, John McCain-esque Republicans have done considerably better than Donald Trump. And yes, maybe if Donald Trump was the Republican nominee in those time periods where there was decreased black turnout and there was a higher vote share of the Republican support in the Atlanta suburbs. But you cannot deny the fact that in 2016, in a year where almost every single state voted to the right of where they did in 2012, Georgia voted to the left pretty considerably, might I add. And Donald Trump has never been the most popular president in Georgia. He's pretty much been around even, sometimes being approved of, sometimes being disapproved of. That is not a good sign, and it was a very telling sign before we actually saw the results that Donald Trump was disapproved of or barely approved of in a state he won by roughly 5 points, rounding down. So what happened this election? Well, Joe Biden really and Stacey Abrams and a number of organizers in the state drove up black turnout. They focused in on this state. Obama spoke here. A number of notable Democrats spoke here. But that energy didn't exactly translate to these Democrats on the other ticket. Now, Jon Ossoff did not do as well as Democrats did in the Senate special election. If you add up to the Democrats in their performance in the special election, they received 48.4% of the vote. But all in all, the Democratic Party did better than their ceiling really before. I mean, Georgia hasn't had a super strong history of electing Democrats recently. Now, they have had a very strong history in the past, but we're talking about modern political history. We're talking about, post-2000 election, post-Bill Clinton presidency type of history. And Democrats really haven't had much luck in this state. The fact that Jon Ossoff is even heading into a runoff is pretty substantial. Now, nobody really expected Jon Ossoff to win, but I think he can. I think with the increased turnout, if the Democrats play their cards the same way they did in this election, and David Perdue's reluctance to push away Donald Trump, that is something that is really going to hurt him. I mean, these voters rejected Donald Trump to begin with. I mean, don't even get me started on Kelly Loeffler, who seems to be fully in love with the President of the United States still. I mean, we talked about Kelly Loeffler possibly moving to the center, and it was really hard for her to do so. Her entire campaign was that, quote, I am the more conservative candidate. She bashed Doug Collins for supporting Mitt Romney. You know, Mitt Romney, the 2012 Republican nominee, was he supposed to not vote for him? Was he supposed to vote for President Obama? Were they supposed to see that he was going to eventually vote to impeach President Trump? I mean, there were so many issues with Kelly Loeffler's campaign, in my opinion, that I saw as warning signs that she was going to have to drastically shift her message if she was entering into the special election. And she did enter into the special election. She got the second place position under Raphael Warnock. Unfortunately for her, she has not, or I guess I could say, unfortunately for her, the Republican Party, she has not positioned herself in any way differently than she did entering into the general election. And that is my main problem with her as a candidate. David Perdue, very good speaker, also has a fine history, I guess you could say, and that would win him Republican support. Kelly Loeffler, sure, she would win the diehard Republican support, but you do have to realize that there's a reason why 20% of these voters voted for Doug Collins when she was the literal incumbent in this race. She should have won more than Raphael Warnock. She should have won more than 1 in 4 voters in the Georgia special election, and I was expecting her to move towards the center to actually win this race, but she simply isn't doing it. She's jumping onto a candidate, President Trump, who lost this Senate race. There's a reason why, Jon Ossoff was not expected to win, but Raphael Warnock is expected to win. There is a very clear difference. Raphael Warnock may not be stronger than Jon Ossoff, I would say, because there is a little bit more opposition research that could be done on Raphael Warnock given his very, very much outspokenness. But Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue both have issues where people think of them as insider traders, and Kelly Loeffler more so. Her husband literally owns the New York Stock Exchange. Can you find someone more disconnected from the American people? And that's not a partisan statement to say. She is extremely disconnected from her constituents, given that she represents a state that definitely needs someone who actually, number one, was in the state of Georgia, I would say, from the beginning. And it's very difficult for her to try to spin this, what people view her as a rich senator, someone who did insider trading, someone who used congressional knowledge to save her own stocks. There are so many issues with her campaign from the beginning. Even Republicans were opposed to her. They wanted Doug Collins in because Doug Collins would have a much better chance at winning the special election. But in terms of the special election, I just can't see Kelly Loeffler doing better than David Perdue. And I really don't see a pathway where she has an obliterating margin. If she is to win, it'll be by less than 1% or 1 to 2%. I just don't see the type of support that we saw for any other Republicans in the past. She's clinging on to Donald Trump, which is why I think that Raphael Warnock actually might edge this one out, because she is clinging on to a candidate who lost the race, absolutely lost the Georgia presidential election race. And while sure, he was close, you can't win with just close. You need more than that. And she is by no means, going to win over more voters than Donald Trump if she continues down this pathway. She needs to shift towards the center. She claims to be more right-wing than President Trump. And if these voters rejected President Trump, and many of them because they viewed him as too extreme or not a representative of the traditional Republican Party, with more moderate Republicans such as John McCain, Mitt Romney, George Bush, Republicans they elected in the past or voted for in the past. And she comes in and says, I'm the most conservative candidate. There's a reason 20% of her own constituents on the Republican side, more than that actually, voted against her, despite her being the incumbent. Now for David Perdue, I'm moving past the special election. I just think that Warnock is going to have a pretty good chance at actually winning that race. I think Jon Ossoff is going to have a trickier time, but the Democrats have proven to us that in this election, despite other states maybe not going their way, neighboring Florida, neighboring North Carolina, their increased turnout amongst the African-American population cannot be ignored. It was higher in North Carolina. It was higher in Florida. It was extremely high in Georgia. And you're looking at the support that the Republicans actually lost. It wasn't just obviously amongst black voters. They actually gained marginally, but that wasn't enough to even shift the state by any means in favor of Donald Trump. He obviously lost the state. They lost support amongst the Atlanta suburbs. If we can get a county map up here, we can see that in the Atlanta metro area, the Democratic Party absolutely, even in this Senate election, which shouldn't have gone too well for Jon Ossoff, looking at the expectations for this state compared to 2016. But if you're looking at the support that the Democrats receive here, look at the margins. This is an area where Democrats actually hadn't done as well as they did now in the past. The entire state itself shifted to the left. That is super significant. That is super significant. It was enough so that a lot of these major cities, obviously they were going to go blue, but look at the vote count. They're not really comparable to 2016. Really, this entire state saw a lot higher turnout on the presidential level. Donald Trump received roughly 2 million votes in 2016. He received 2.4 million now, but it wasn't enough because turnout was at an all-time high, and the Democratic Party, like I said, general rule of thumb, when turnout's high, the Democratic Party generally does well. That wasn't the case in Florida, but overall, across the rest of the states, that actually seemed to be the case, with the Democrats flipping Arizona. But major point here is that the Democrats, if they repeat what they did on the presidential level, and with David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler being closely associated, being closely tied to President Trump, it is very likely that the Democrats use that to their advantage, both fundraising-wise. The Democrats could be on track to raise more money. Jon Ossoff has raised more money than David Perdue. Raphael Warnock has not raised more money than Kelly Loeffler, but it's very possible that he does in the coming future. They still need to report more by January 5th. And while the political betting markets expect the GOP to win both Senate races, they also expected Donald Trump to win the state of Georgia. Let's take a look at where Georgia was on Election Day. Joe Biden, 88 cents for a share, but if you look at the 90-day spread, let's look at that lead right on Election Day, 92 cents by the closing bell. 92 cents ended up being incorrect. So don't fully follow the betting markets. They may tell you some things that just won't be accurate, but right now they actually give the Republicans a smaller, chance, you would say, if you compare it to percentages at winning the special election and the regular election than Donald Trump had at winning the state. So that may actually be a sign that the Democrats could be doing well if they overcame that large of a deficit. But obviously, it's just the betting markets. It's how people feel, people with money feel. But both Senate races are absolutely winnable for the Democrats. 538, while may not have been the most reliable forecast for the 2020 elections, still expected Raphael Warnock to win. 63 to 37, I wouldn't exactly say those are the exact odds. It's probably more 55 Kelly Loeffler, 45 Raphael Warnock. For the regular election, the Democrats still probably have this chance at winning, 43%. I think Jon Ossoff has a very realistic shot at winning. And if they do it, if the Democrats do it, it brings them at the majority. It puts them at 50 seats. So it's not out of the question. A lot of people on the right wing are going to say that this is going to be the first push away from a President Biden. It may be. It's possible, but he has not been inaugurated, and this special election is not really a special election. It's a runoff election taking place before he's in. And with Donald Trump continuously not accepting the election results, with David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler refusing to admit that Joe Biden has won the presidency, Do you think that is going to roll over well with Republicans who may have voted for David Perdue because they thought he wasn't as quote-unquote extreme as Donald Trump, or voted for Doug Collins that because Kelly Loeffler was so extreme and she's now even getting more extreme, she isn't moving towards the center? Are they going to be now more inclined to vote for the Democrat or just not vote at all? So if these Republicans that voted in the regular election don't turn out, or these Republicans that were voting for Perdue before are now voting for Ossoff, or were voting for Collins before but are now voting for Warnock, there's a whole number of situations that the Democratic Party could be doing better because these senators are refusing to admit election defeat on the presidential level and are also, clinging on to Donald Trump. And I get it. He's the president. They can't win without his base. But Republicans have shown us that in some states, they don't need the support of President Trump, or they don't need the full-fledged support of President Trump, because obviously Trump isn't going to endorse the Democrat. He may stay quiet about a race, and he may be upset. But I don't see why these Republican senators, both of them, should be bent to a person who didn't even win the state. They shouldn't be clinging on to someone who didn't even win the state on the presidential level. If I was David Perdue and I was outperforming the presidential ticket, that would be it. I mean, I would just focus in on my message. If I was Kelly Loeffler, I would move towards the center. But neither of those candidates are doing so, which is why it's a very real possibility that the Democrats win both Senate seats and in turn win back the United States Senate. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.